call upon Nishara Mendis to talk to us on challenges in maintaining and extending Sri Lanka's record on health, a comment on international trade law and human development. Ms. Mendis is a PhD fellow at IGIR, having obtained a degree in law from the University of Colombo with first-class honours, a Master of Laws from Yale Law School. She has worked as a lecturer in environmental law, land law and the law of delict at the University of Colombo. She has also been a research assistant to Justice Veeramantri, one of the most famous judges of the Supreme Court, at the Veeramantri Center for Peace Education and Research, on a publication for the World Future Council on Religion, Environment and the Responsibilities to Future Generations. Yes, Ms. Mendis.
Thank you. My talk actually connects a little bit with the presentations by the first and second presenters, and I'm happy to say I can trust that you now understand quite a lot about economic social rights, the right to development, even the human rights approach, capabilities approach that were talked about by the first and second presenters. But I'm focusing on a particular economic social right, a particular aspect of development, that is with regard to health, and I'm focusing on the challenges in maintaining and extending Sri Lanka's record on health with special reference to international trade in services. The main theme of this conference is Sri Lanka as a hub in Asia. We know that Sri Lanka has always been an important strategic trading hub in the region from ancient times. But my presentation is trying to focus on another way in which we can be a hub or be a beacon to the region, and that is with regard to our experiences in health policy and the fact that we should focus not only about being a hub in trade, but also a hub in terms of health policy making. My paper, the contents of my paper are like this. You can see that it's focusing a little bit about something called the GATS, which is the General Agreement on Trade in Services. But for the purpose of this presentation, I will pick a few, let's say a few themes out of that paper, which I want you to focus on today. And the focus of the presentation is this. My thesis for this presentation, in a sense. Sri Lanka's national policies on health have achieved commendable results. In this, we can be a beacon to the region and to the world. These policies are not designed for increasing expenditure, production, or trade, but on health outcomes and human development. It's not merely economic development, but on human development, and that is something that we have to, I think about a little deeply. And in relation to this issue of trade and development, we need to assess international trade in health services, and for that we have to also include the WTO GATS agreement from this angle, and I will say something more about that later in the presentation. Now in my paper I've referred to three main value systems in the discourse on development, and all three value systems have been incorporated in Sri Lanka's development policy from the time of even before independence, I could say. That is to combine these three different strands, what has been called the positivistic value system promoted by free market freedoms and efficiency, a normative holistic approach to human development, and thirdly, the rights-based approach linked with economic and social rights. And for my topic, I am going to be, of course, referring to right to health. So this is sort of simplified version of what I'm trying to argue. There are market freedoms, there's human development, human rights, the right to health in terms of health policy, how we decide how we're going to structure the health system in Sri Lanka. Human rights and the right to health can be used to actually make a connection between market freedoms and human development in a sense. Market freedoms are really about how is the economy doing? Has there been economic growth? What are the numbers? Human development is really about how are the people doing. So I would want you to draw your attention to that aspect more. And I just have a few facts here. If we look at per capita total expenditure on health, 2011 WHO statistics, the dark blue that you can see is the highest expenditure. Sri Lanka is in yellow, which is towards the bottom in terms of per capita total expenditure on health in terms of US dollars. Now, this does not necessarily mean that these colors reflect the level of human development or health indicators. This is just about expenditure, right? Even the WTO Secretariat, in a background note on health and social services in 1998, the WTO was established in 1995, and this was the first note on health and health services, health and social services, cites Sri Lanka with regard to health expenditure, stating that higher results have been achieved in, for example, life expectancy in comparison to countries spending 20 or 30 times more on health. So it is not about the amount in US dollars or whatever currency, it is how, what kind of policy. Now, another interesting set of statistics, the total expenditure on health as a percentage of GDP in 2011, according to WHO statistics. Sri Lanka here is on the bottom, it's in red. The US is still the highest. I want to draw your attention to the fact that US, although it has the highest GDP expenditure on health, is considered the worst of the industrialized countries in terms of health outcomes. So the fact that Sri Lanka is in red, the lowest GDP, does not mean that it is the lowest in terms of actual health outcomes, health indicators, and human development. So I want that point to be stressed. There was a reference to Amartya Sen by the earlier presenter as well, Amartya Sen's capabilities approach and his contribution to the concept of human development, which was later taken on by the UNDP. From early times in his studies on poverty and development, there has been specific mention of Sri Lanka's health policy as an example of how you can have good policy with less expenditure. Right. Another very important study, the Anand and Ravalian study, also notes specifically Sri Lanka's impressive record of progress in human development despite being a poor country, that it also illustrates what the right sort of public action can achieve independently of income growth. You also have the most recent human development report of the UNDP pointing out basically that progress depends on how countries use development policy. Right? I'm emphasizing this because we can have a lot of economic growth. We are growing fast, our economic growth rates are good, there are a lot of good predictions, but it is not just those numbers, it is what are the outcomes for the people, and that depends on how countries use development policy. And I also just want to make a brief mention of the Committee on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights and the Limburg Principle on the implementation of the ICECR. Again, it doesn't matter what type of economic policy you have, as long as it is democratic, respects human rights. There are various roads to the achievement of economic and social rights. There are various roads to the achievement of the right to health. So let's say Sri Lanka's policy is something that perhaps can be an example to the region and to the world. However, even with all the available facts, some economists still rely on the old efficiency arguments to devalue public health services in favor of promoting free market values in health services. Sometimes this is this argument is sort of local national policy versus global or international policy. In a way, it happens like that because of, as I will talk, because of international trade in services and the rules in that system. I don't want to go too much into the comparative studies of law and policy in other jurisdictions, but just to be aware, the UK system, the Canadian system, the UK NHS, National Health Service, the Canadian Medicare, also the other systems that have been studied and identified as good systems, the Ceará province of Brazil, Kerala in India, and Sri Lanka. We have to be aware of commonalities because there are certain things when it comes to in the international level, look at how we can create partnerships, understand what's going on, and also understand how people protect their national policy, their right to health in other countries. But I'm not going to go into that in too much detail because I want to move on to the issue of the WTO. And here I want to just give a very quick framework. The WTO is an international organization dealing with the global rules of trade between nations, so more than 150 members. Among its primary functions is monitoring national trade policies, and this is the part that I want to focus on for this presentation. There are many agreements of the WTO. I'm focusing on the General Agreement on Trade in Services with regard to health services. Now, the basic pillars of the WTO system include the most favored nation treatment, the national treatment concept or idea, and market access. Now, for the GATS, there is a little bit of flexibility in terms of national treatment and market access. We don't have very much choice about MFN treatment. Now, a lot of people say that the GATS is therefore very flexible. It allows for more national policy. It allows for variations in how you would deal with a particular service. Now, the GATS framework, when it talks about national policy in the early Uruguay round negotiations that led up to the WTO, talked about respect for policy objectives as national laws and regulations applying to services. In 1995, the preamble to the WTO agreement also refers to the social objectives of raising standards of living, but does not specifically talk about respect for national policy objectives. The preamble to the GATS, because of the sensitivity of the whole area of services, refers to due respect for national policy objectives and also to the desire to strengthen developing country domestic services capacity, their efficiency and competitiveness. Now, this sounds okay, right? But however, it is only in the preamble of the agreement. Now, the issue is whether this respect for national policy translates into something concrete in legal terms within the framework of the GATS. I have just highlighted some of the aspects. Is there a public service exemption in the GATS? Only if they are neither commercial services nor in competition with other service suppliers. And that is something that's quite difficult to argue in the way that we have the public-private connection in health services today, even in Sri Lanka. Is there a freedom not to schedule commitments? These are commitments for national treatment and market access that I mentioned earlier. Well, you can avoid it, but realistically, there is an obligation to progressively liberalize services according to the GATS, and there are also real-world pressures from powerful economic states for us to open up our markets. Then there's another important point. There is a negotiating mandate for subsidies within the GATS. The rules are yet to be confirmed, but we need to be aware of this and participate in this and make sure that subsidies for public services, or even specifically subsidies for public health services, are not included in WTO GATS rules. And for that, we have to be aware and active and participate in the negotiating process. There are also exceptions: public morals, human life, and health. And it has been argued that right to health can be brought in under these exceptions. But just to point out, the exceptions are the last resort. It's the final safety net when everything else fails. And there we have to argue that the measures that the country took to protect public health services are necessary according to the structure of the exceptions and the case law that has developed in the WTO. So, conclusions for health policy in Sri Lanka. It's important to formulate a comprehensive national health policy, to utilize available expertise, because I think in Sri Lanka there is a lot of expertise on this area. There are people who have been advising internationally on this and being advising the WHO on this. So yes, we have expertise. The Health Ministry must work closely with other relevant government ministries and departments, including the Commerce Department and the Ministry of External Affairs, especially with regard to international trade in services. We have to maintain awareness of the implications of the WTO system for health. We have to support and promote pro-poor and pro-development interpretations of WTO law as lawyers working in international trade and human rights. And we have to avoid, as a government, as a country, making specific WTO GATS commitments for market access and national treatment to liberalize health services. Stakeholders in public health services and civil society must also be vigilant and active in order for us to succeed in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.